The Rice Bank Path Behind the Coconut Row Where the Rice Fields Remember. Episode 1. I was 18 the first time I heard the bicycle chain in the rain. Latch, rattle, catch. At first, I thought the sound belonged to someone living. I was wrong. This was 1998. I thought I was going home to say goodbye to my grandfather. I did not know the rice fields had been waiting for me too. Grandpa Nam had been the center of my world since I was small enough to sit at his feet and listen to the last water pump coughing itself quiet before dark. He had lived in Bolua hamlet all his life. He knew every family's debt, not every family's story, their debt. There is a difference. A story can be told at a table after dinner, with tea, with laughter, with someone correcting the details. A debt is different. A debt sits under the floorboards. It waits in the bottom of a rice jar. It sleeps in the mud beneath the house, and when the rain comes, it wakes up. Over the decades, Grandpa Nam had decided which debts could be spoken aloud and which had to be pressed into the mud and walked away from. He carried this silence with the quiet conviction of a man who believed some truths, once uncovered, would drown more people than silence ever had. When word came that he was calling my name in the night, I caught the first bus south. By the time I reached the junction, rain had already turned the road into a long brown wound. My friend Ty was waiting there with his bicycle. Ty was a year older than me, thin in the way boys become thin when they grow up working too much and eating too little. His father had died when Ty was 11, or disappeared. The adults used both words depending on who was listening. His mother sold rice cakes at the market and came home every evening with flour on her hands and tiredness in her eyes. Ty had one bicycle. Old, black, heavy. The chain had its own voice. Latch, rattle, catch. I could have recognized that sound anywhere. He was pushing the bicycle toward me through the rain, trying to look brave and not quite managing it. "Main road's flooded," he said. "We go by the rice bank, 20 minutes. He was already turning the bicycle toward the narrow path between the paddies. I did not move. Grandpa Nam had warned me about that path once. I was 12, pointing at it in the late afternoon, asking where it went. He had pulled me back by the shoulder, firm enough to hurt. "Don't go that way after the sun drops," he said. I asked why. He looked at me for a long time. That was how Grandpa Nam answered dangerous questions. First, he looked at you until you felt smaller than the thing you had asked. Then he said, "If you hear someone call your name out there, anyone, any voice you know, don't answer. Don't even open your mouth." Why? Because answering means you still carry something for whoever is calling, and the path will know it. I was 12 then. At 12, a warning becomes a story. At 18, with your grandfather dying and your friend already walking ahead, a warning becomes an inconvenience. So I followed Ty. The Mekong Delta at night in the rainy season is not dark the way a city is dark. A city is dark because the lights have gone out. The Delta is dark because the water's full of roots, full of silt, full of things that sank quietly and were never brought back up. The rice leaned in from both sides, wet and heavy, brushing against our arms. The canal ran beside the path, black and swollen, with water palms standing along the edge like people bowing their heads. Every few meters, a frog called from somewhere in the mud, then stopped, as if it had remembered something. Ty walked ahead. I followed the sound of his chain. Latch, rattle, catch. 10 minutes in, the bamboo caught me. One moment the path was clear. Then there was a sharp crack. A cane that had been lying flat across the mud snapped upward and cut my right shin open, clean and fast. I pulled back, cursing under my breath. Blood ran into my sandal, black in the rain, mixing with the mud. Ty turned. "You all right?" "It's nothing." I pressed my hand against the cut and kept walking. I did not understand then. Bolua hamlet had been taking account of the living and the dead for longer than anyone could remember. Land that has held enough bodies acquires a kind of attention. Not a mind exactly, not a soul. Something older than both. It notices blood most of all. After that night, I was no longer a visitor passing through. I was someone the rice bank path had tasted. That was the beginning. We heard the sound from the canal 5 minutes later. A slow slap against the water. Then another. Then another. Steady, patient. The rhythm of someone bailing water from a flooded field. It was the kind of sound that belonged to dawn, when farmers squatted in the mist with their pants rolled to the knee. It did not belong to midnight in the rain, beside a canal where no one should have been working. Ty stopped. "Someone's out late," he said. He lifted his flashlight and swept the beam along the canal bank. Black water. No boat. No person. No scoop. The sound continued. Slap, slap, slap. Then the flashlight caught something beneath the surface. A shape. Wide. Pale. Rising slowly. Not breaking the water. Only approaching the underside of it, the way drowned things rise when they are almost ready to be found. A face. Flat, white as river silt, eyes open. The face of a woman who had been underwater long enough that expression had left her. She looked at me, not at Ty, at me. Her mouth opened beneath the surface, and Grandpa Nam's voice came out. "Come down, lamb, it's safe here. Grandpa's waiting." The voice was perfect. The roughness from years of pipe tobacco, the weight in every word, the particular sound of a man who had spent his life being the person other people came to when they were afraid. I had been answering that voice since before I could form words. The answer rose in my throat. One syllable. A habit older than thought. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. Ty grabbed my sleeve, or maybe I grabbed his. I don't remember which of us moved first. We backed away from the canal. The woman in the water did not follow. The bailing sound stopped. For 3 breaths, there was only rain. Then it began again. Slap, 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 keeping pace with us. After that, the path changed. Not all at once. These things rarely announce themselves. The lights of the hamlet should have been ahead by then. We should have seen the lamp in Grandpa Nam's window. We should have smelled cooking smoke, heard dogs, heard someone coughing in a house with thin walls. Instead, the patties went on. The same water palms, the same strip of mud, the same black canal. Ty stopped talking. That frightened me more than the face in the water. Ty always talked when he was scared. Jokes, complaints, insults, anything to make fear smaller. Now he only walked. Then we heard the second bicycle. Behind us. Same distance back. Same speed. Same loose chain, latch, rattle, catch. Ty's bicycle was in his hands. I looked down at it. Then behind us. The path was empty. The sound kept coming. A voice called from somewhere in the rice. "Hey, when did you leave me behind at the canal?" Ty's voice. Easy, familiar, almost laughing. Ty froze. I heard him swallow. "Don't answer," I said. He did not, but his hand tightened on the bicycle handle until his knuckles turned pale. The voice called again, a little puzzled this time. "Ty, lamb, wait for me." Then softer. "I'm wet." Ty made a sound I had never heard from him before. Not a word, not a cry. Something smaller than both. For one moment, I was not sure the boy standing beside me was Ty. I looked at his hands. The split on his left index finger from a fence wire. The scar on his wrist from when we were children, and he had fallen into a broken clay jar. His breathing ragged and uneven. Real. I thought he was real. I hoped he was real. Behind us, the bicycle chain faded into the rain. The lights ahead did not come any closer. The will-o-wisps were waiting near the burial mound. 3 lights, blue-green, hovering at waist height. They did not drift like fireflies. They stood still, as if someone was holding them. The old people of the Delta called them wandering fire, the lights of those who had not been found, the ones no one had lit incense for because no one living knew what name to write on the paper. The canal water had risen behind us. The path back was gone, so we went forward. The burial mound sat low against the dark, older than the hamlet's memory of it. Proper graves stood at the edges, with concrete markers and ceramic photographs. But in the center, half swallowed by grass and rain, were 3 graves with no names. No stones, no photos, no incense bowl, only objects. On the first grave, a rusted bicycle wheel. On the second, a sickle broken at the neck, its blade pressed into the earth. On the third, an upside-down rice bowl. Ty crouched beside the bicycle wheel. His face changed. Not fear, recognition. "What is it?" I asked. He did not answer at first. His hand reached toward the wheel, then stopped just before touching it. "My father had a bicycle," he said. "My mother told me it went into the canal the night he disappeared." His voice became very small. "She said they never found it." Rain ran down the rusted spokes. Then the wheel turned. Just once. A slow half-turn in the mud. Latch, rattle, catch. Ty fell back. The 3 blue lights trembled over the graves, patient as witnesses. Lightning split the sky. For 1 white second, I saw the whole rice bank path behind us. And on it, people. Dozens of them. Standing between the rows of rice. Standing along the canal. Standing at the places where the ground had held something down for years. Old men, women, children. A boy with one hand on a bicycle that was not there. A woman with red thread around her wrist. A child holding an empty bowl. None of them moved. None of them threatened us. They simply stood facing Grandpa Nam's house, where a lamp still burned in the window. Thunder rolled. Darkness returned. They were gone. but the mud was full of bare footprints, fresh, deep, as if they had been standing there for a very long time. Ty found the edge of the canal in the dark. I heard it before I saw it, a sharp intake of breath, the scrape of sandals on mud, then water closing around something heavy. I turned. Ty was in the canal to his waist, both hands gripping the roots of a water palm. His face tilted up. Rain ran down his cheeks. The black water moved around him in slow circles. He had not slipped. The bank had given way beneath him, or something under the bank had decided to open. I dropped to my stomach and reached for him. Ty, he looked at me. For 1 second, his face was his own. Then the water rose to his chest. Lamb, he said. And from somewhere behind me on the rice bank path, another voice said the same thing. Lamb, Ty's voice. I froze. The Ty in the canal stared up at me, eyes wide, both hands clawing at the roots. The Ty behind me began to laugh softly. Not loudly, not like a man, like someone remembering how laughter was supposed to sound. Lamb, the voice behind me said again. Don't pull him, that's not me. The Ty in the canal shook his head. Don't listen, he whispered, please. The bank softened under my elbows. Mud slid into the water. My fingers closed around his wrist. It was warm, living warm, so I pulled. His hand came up first, then his arm, then his shoulder, then his face broke the surface and opened its mouth to breathe. It was not Ty. The face that came out of the canal was pale and wide, the skin swollen tight over the bones, eyes open and empty, hair pasted across its cheeks like river grass. Its mouth open. Black water spilled out onto my hands. Behind me, the real Ty screamed. I let go. The thing dropped back into the canal without a splash. For one moment, the water was still. Then something cold closed around my left ankle. This time it was a hand, thin fingers, mud under the nails, a wrist wrapped in red thread. It pulled once, not hard enough to drag me in, just enough to let me know it could. Ty grabbed the back of my shirt and hauled me away from the bank. We fell together in the mud, breathing like animals. The red thread remained around my ankle. Frayed, waterlogged, tight. When I raised the flashlight, she was already at the surface. Not rising, waiting. Her hair spread across the black water. Her face was pale but no longer empty. Her eyes were open, fixed on me with something worse than hunger, recognition. She had worn Grandpa Nam's voice. She had worn the canal's silence. Now she wore her own grief. She lifted one hand from the water. The red thread around her wrist disappeared beneath the surface and came back up around my ankle. A tether, a claim. Ty was whispering beside me. Don't say anything. Lamb, don't say anything. But the woman in the canal was not asking me to answer. She was asking me to remember. Her mouth opened. No voice came out at first, only water. Then beneath the sound of rain, I heard a woman crying from very far away. Not in the canal, not in the field, in a room. A room I had sat in as a child. Grandpa Nam's house. My grandmother's voice, younger than I had ever heard it, said, if we tell them, they'll blame the whole family. A man answered, Grandpa Nam, then we don't tell them. The woman in the canal watched me as the memory, not mine, but the Hamlet's, passed through the water and into my blood. I saw a flood year. I saw a woman on the rice bank carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth. I saw men with lanterns under the water palms. I saw her slip. I saw her hand reach up from the canal. I saw someone turn away, not because he did not hear her, because he did. The woman's fingers tightened around the thread. My ankle burned. I knew then that she did not want pity. She wanted a name. I searched the fragments I had collected over years of visits to Bolua Hamlet. The half-sentences, the meals that went quiet when I entered. My grandmother once, to a neighbor, Auntie Lynn was lost in the flood year. Grandpa Nam, sharp as a knife. Don't bring up Lynn. And Auntie Lan, who lived alone, who set one extra bowl at the table every 7th month, who burned paper offerings at the canal's edge every anniversary of the flood. A woman who had gone into the water. A woman who had called for help. A woman who had heard rain answer instead. I said her name, Auntie Lynn. The canal went still. Not quiet, still. The way water goes still when the thing moving through it has stopped. The woman's expression changed slowly. Not into peace, not into forgiveness. Something more painful than both. She remembered being human. Her grip loosened. But the thread did not break. That was when the other sounds began. A bicycle chain turning far below the water. A sickle moving through dry grass. A child swallowing in the dark. A rice bowl being set upside down on a wooden floor. Soft. Patient. Close. Auntie Lynn sank back beneath the surface. By choice. Naming her did not send her away. It only gave her back what the Hamlet had taken. And it cost me something. For the rest of that night, I could not speak. Ty shook me, asked if I was hurt, asked if I could hear him. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Only the taste of canal water. The rice bank path knew my blood. Now it knew my voice. We found the real path by following the roosters. The old people of the Delta will tell you, a dead thing can copy almost any sound if it has listened long enough. A father's cough, a mother's footstep, a friend's bicycle chain, a grandfather's voice. But rooster crows harder. Not because the sound is sacred, because a real rooster does not crow alone. Dogs answer. Other roosters stir. The darkness shifts. The air changes toward morning. A false rooster cries into silence. We heard the crow. Dogs answered from the hamlet. The sky over the eastern paddies turned the color of water before rain. Ty held my arm because I still could not speak. We walked toward the living world. Grandpa Nam's house stood at the edge of the hamlet with its door facing the canal, the way it always had. Real door. Real direction. A lamp burned in the window. Inside, the room smelled of tobacco, damp wood, and the closed air of a sick man waiting for something he had long feared. Grandpa Nam lay on the wooden plank bed. He looked smaller than I remembered, but his eyes were open. He looked at the cut on my shin, the mud on my legs, the red thread around my ankle. Then he looked at my mouth. He knew. The rice bank path took your blood, he said. I nodded, and something took your voice. I nodded again. Ty stood behind me, shaking. Grandpa Nam looked past me at him. Go home, he said. Sit with your mother tonight. Don't let her sleep alone. Ty did not move. Go, Grandpa Nam said. This time Ty went. When the door closed, the room became very quiet. My grandmother stood near the stove. My uncle stood in the doorway. No one asked what had happened. In Bolua hamlet, fear did not always make people speak. Sometimes it made them better at silence. I tried to say Auntie Lynn's name. No sound came out. But Grandpa Nam heard it anyway. His face changed. Not surprise, recognition. She followed you back, he said. I forced air through my throat. Nothing. Grandpa Nam looked at the back door. Mud marked the floor behind me in a thin trail, though I had come through the front. That is not the same as letting go, he said. My grandmother set down the pot she was holding, very carefully, with both hands. Grandpa Nam closed his eyes. This hamlet stays alive by knowing what to forget. I wanted to ask him why Auntie Lynn had been left in the water. I wanted to ask why my grandmother looked like she had heard a sentence passed down in court. I wanted to ask about the rusted bicycle wheel, about Ty's father, about the broken sickle, about the upside-down bowl, about the people I had seen standing in the lightning, all facing this house. But I had no voice. Maybe that was mercy. Maybe if I had been able to speak, I would have asked too much, and he would have died trying not to answer. Grandpa Nam breathed in. The sound caught in his chest. There are others, he said. His eyes remained closed. The path will keep sending them to you now. I stood at the foot of his bed, mute, wet, and shaking. Some truths undo more than they repair, he said. You will have to learn which ones. A pause. I never did. Then he opened his eyes one last time. Not at me, at the back door. His lips moved. For a moment I thought he was praying. Then I realized he was counting. 1, 2, 3. His face went slack before he reached 4. Grandpa Nam died before the sun cleared the water palms. We held 3 days of mourning. My voice came back on the second morning, not all at once. It returned like something crawling up from a well. A whisper first, then a rasp, then my own voice, but changed in a way I could hear and no one else seemed to. After that night when I spoke near water, my words came back to me a breath late, as if someone under the surface was repeating them. On the second evening, I went behind the house to draw water. The canal was still. The rain had stopped. Then I heard it, slap, 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 the sound of someone bailing water. Slow, steady, not calling my name, not yet, only present. The way a creditor is present, certain that sooner or later, you will turn around. On the third morning, I opened the front door and found 3 objects on the step. A piece of bamboo cane dried with a dark stain along one edge. A smear of canal mud pressed into the shape of a bicycle tire. A rice bowl turned upside down. Ty stood behind me. He had not slept. His eyes were red. His shirt smelled of rain and incense smoke. He looked at the bowl for a long time. That looks like the bowls at Auntie Mai's house, he said. I said nothing. He looked at the bicycle mark in the mud. Then at me. Lamb, he said carefully, as if my name itself might answer wrong. What did you do out there? I looked past him. At the rice bank path beyond the back fence. In morning light, it looked ordinary. That is how places lie. I learned someone's name, I said. Ty waited. Just one? Behind the house, from the direction of the canal, The bailing sound started again. Slap, slap, slap. This time beneath it, something else. A bicycle chain, far away. Or under the water, latch, rattle, catch. Ty heard it too. His face emptied. The upside-down bowl on the step trembled. Once, twice. Then water began to leak from beneath it, thin and black. It spread across the stone toward my bare feet. Ty whispered, "Don't lift it." I was not going to. From under the bowl came a sound so soft I almost mistook it for the rain beginning again. A child swallowing, hungry, waiting. Then a woman's voice from the canal said, "One name." The bicycle chain answered from somewhere beyond the fence. Many left. I looked down at my ankle. The red thread was still there. Still tied, still tight. And slowly, as if pulled by a hand beneath the floor, it began to move toward the back door. The upside-down rice bowl at Auntie May's house, where the rice fields remember. Episode 2. In Bolua Hamlet, every house had its rules. You didn't leave a knife facing up on the cutting board after dark. You didn't call someone's name from outside the gate after the sun went down. You didn't walk the rice bank path behind the coconut row alone after the lamps were lit. And in Auntie Mai's house, you didn't eat until she knocked. I had known this rule since I was small, the way you know certain things in a village without being told, the way you simply absorb them through the soles of your feet, through the smell of the air, through the particular silence that falls when adults decide a child is heard enough. 3 knocks on the floor before the first bite. Always 3. That evening, Auntie Mai set the bowls down and lowered herself to her knees beside the table. Her left hand pressed flat against the old wood. 1 knock. 2. Her hand stopped. She sat up, reached for her chopsticks, began to eat as if nothing had paused. I looked at the floor where her hand had rested. Then I looked at the space beneath the table, the far corner where the lamplight didn't quite reach. There was a bowl there, turned upside down. Porcelain, thin-rimmed, pale as old bone. No one had put it there while I was watching. No one had walked past that corner all evening. I ate. The rice was warm. The fish was salted right. Outside, the Hmong moved slowly in the dark. Then from beneath the table a sound. Not a creak of old wood. Not the house settling. A swallowing sound. Soft. Patient. Steady. The way someone swallows when they have been waiting a long time to be offered something and have learned not to ask. I set my chopsticks down. Auntie Mai did not look up. After the meal, she stood at the basin and washed her hands. Once, twice, 3 times. I watched her work the soap between her fingers with the focused attention of someone trying to remove something that did not come off with water. She washed a 4th time, a 5th. I asked about the bowl. She dried her hands on the cloth hanging from the window latch. She folded the cloth precisely, as if the folding mattered. "Don't lift it," she said. "It doesn't know yet where it died." She did not explain what it was. She turned and walked toward the back room, and the lamplight threw her shadow long across the floor, across the corner where the bowl sat upside down in the dark. I sat alone at the table. I looked down. The bowl was gone. No sound, no movement. I had not looked away for more than a moment. Where it had rested, the floorboards held a small circle of damp, a ring of warmth, as if the bowl had been lifted from beneath rather than above. I felt it through the thin rubber of my sandal. A heat that had no business being there in a house with no fire under the floor. I did not decide to follow. I was simply standing at the door. Then I was outside, and my feet were already moving toward the far end of the hamlet, where Auntie Lan's house sat alone at the edge of the water. Her lamp was on. The door was open by a hand's width. I knocked, and she waved me in without surprise, the way people in Bolua Hamlet sometimes expected you before you arrived. She was standing at the stove. A pot of rice was boiling, large enough for 4 people, though she lived alone. As I watched, she reached into the bag beside the stove and added another handful of rice without pausing, without measuring, without seeming to notice she had done it. The upside-down bowl sat on the edge of the stone counter beside the burner. Auntie Lan did not look at it. I asked her about the Mua Nuok Noi, the flood season, the year the water came early. Her voice did not change. She spoke the way someone speaks when they have rehearsed the words so many times that the words no longer feel like theirs. Auntie Mai had come to her door in the night. There was a child. There was not enough rice for another mouth. But she had taken it in because that was what you did. That was what the hamlet meant. And she had kept it through one night. And in the morning, the rice was gone. So she had passed it on. To where? I asked. She looked into the pot. Not at the bowl. I passed it on, she said again. The ash in the firebed shifted. A small flame returned where no flame had been. low, sourceless, burning without fuel. She did not flinch, did not look at the bowl beside her elbow. She said very quietly, "It still knows the way here." From somewhere close, closer than the floor, closer than the walls, the swallowing sound again. Not crying, waiting. The next morning, I went back to Auntie Mai's house to help with the water jars. She asked me to bring rice from the storage urn in the kitchen. I lifted the lid. The rice was white and full, recently milled, and in the center of it, pressing down into the grains with the weight of a small hand, reaching for something it needed. A handprint. 4 fingers. A thumb. Each depression precise. The rice around the edges undisturbed. I stood there for a long time. Then I placed my palm over it and smoothed the surface flat. Slow. Even. Until the rice was white and unmarked and there was no sign that anything had reached into it. I put the lid back. Carried the rice out. I didn't think about what I had done until I sat down at the table and heard, for the first time, a spoon tapping softly against the inside of my bowl. My spoon was resting on the table beside my hand. It had not moved. That afternoon, I went to find Ty. He was in the yard beside his bicycle, crouched over the chain with an oiled cloth, working the links the way he did every few days. The mechanical patience of someone who had learned that things lasted longer if you paid attention to them. The chain caught the late light. He looked up when I came through the gate and nodded. We talked the way we always talked. About nothing important, about the ferry schedule, about whether the mango near the canal was ripe yet. And then I asked him what he knew about the flood year. About a child that had been moved from house to house. Ty's hands went still on the chain. He looked at it for a moment. My mother would know, he said. He didn't say anything else. Inside, his mother was sitting near the window with a bowl of tea she wasn't drinking. She began to speak in the same flat voice Auntie Lan had used. The practiced voice. The one that was supposed to mean it didn't hurt anymore. I thought she would get through it the same way. I settled against the wall and prepared to listen. Then the chain outside made a sound. One rattle. Clean. Close. Ty was through the door in an instant. The bicycle was exactly where he had left it. No one in the yard. The chain hanging loose between the sprockets, motionless. Ty stood there and looked at his bicycle the way you look at something you have known your whole life and are suddenly not sure you recognize. His mother did not come to the door. She walked past both of us and out into the yard. She picked up the old cloth that had been draped over the fence post. She shook it once. Then she laid it over the bicycle, carefully from the handlebars down to the rear wheel, and she pushed the bicycle away from the front door and left it against the far wall. She came back inside and sat down. She looked at me. Not at Ty. The flood season, she said, that same year. There had been a child, not hers, not anyone's exactly, passed along the hamlet like an object no one knew what to do with. Her husband had been the last person seen carrying him, the night the water came up to the window ledges, the night the lamps went out across the whole hamlet at once. He had said he would find the child a home. He had not come back. The child had not come back. I have always believed, she said, that he tried. I have to believe that. Her voice was flat and clean, and it carried more weight than crying. From beneath the bed, the porcelain bowl, upside down, steam rising slow from underneath the rim, pale in the low light, like breath on a cold morning. I walked back to Auntie Mai's house alone. The hamlet was dark. The path along the Mong was darker. I kept my pace even and my hands loose at my sides, the way you are supposed to walk in Bolua Hamlet after the lamps go out. Not slow enough to seem lost, not fast enough to seem afraid. The swallowing sound began behind me, not beneath a floor, not beneath a table. Behind me in the open air, on the path between the water and the trees. Steady, patient, keeping pace. I did not stop walking. I did not turn around. But once, just once, something warm breathed against the back of my neck. Not when, the night was still. Then it was gone. I kept walking. Auntie Mai was sitting at the table when I came in. The lamp was turned low. The bowl was back in its corner beneath the table, upside down, the steam rising from underneath it in a thin, even column. I sat down across from her. What was its name? I asked. She didn't answer right away. I reached under the table and placed my hand on the bowl. If you lift that, she said, the hunger will know you. Every meal, for as long as you carry it. I lifted it. The porcelain was warm on both sides, inside and out, as if it had been sitting over something that had been simmering for a very long time. Beneath it, a milk tooth, small and white and slightly worn at the edge, and a length of red thread, looped the way you loop thread around a small wrist. From the floor, the swallowing sound rose once, close, immediate, no longer beneath anything, Then, from no direction I could name, which house was mine? Not crying, not accusing, just the question. The only question, the one that had been traveling from house to house through Bolua hamlet since the year the water came early, looking for an answer that none of the houses had been willing to give. Auntie Mai looked at the milk tooth on the floor. A long time passed. His name was Dewey, she said. The swallowing stopped. The room held itself. Then, from very far below, smaller than before, the way a voice gets small when the body it belongs to is finally tired. Which house was mine? No one answered. Because no one knew. That was the true shape of what had been done. Auntie Mai placed her hand flat on the floor. She knocked once, twice. Her fingers hovered above the wood, trembling, still waiting to become the third knock. Her lips moved into the shape of ba, the Vietnamese word for three, the word for the knock she had not been able to make since the year she stood in Auntie Lan's doorway in the dark, holding a child she had already decided to give away. No sound came out. She had been trying to make that sound for 30 years. In the morning, she was up before the light. I heard her at the basin, washing her hands once, twice, 3 times, 4, 5. When I came out, she had already set the table. 2 bowls, 2 pairs of chopsticks. She reached toward the drawer and her hand closed around a third pair. She held them for a moment, not placing them down, not putting them back, just held them, the wood resting across her fingers. Then she returned them to the drawer, slowly, like setting something down that had been heavy for a long time. She sat down. I looked at the 2 pairs of chopsticks. Why 2? I asked. She counted very softly. 1, a pause. 2. Her mouth formed the shape of ba. 3. No sound came out. She picked up her chopsticks and began to eat. I looked at my bowl. The rice was white and warm, and it smelled the way rice smells in the early morning in the Mekong Delta, when the mist is still on the water and the day hasn't decided yet what it will be. I took my spoon and scooped a small portion, 1 spoonful, not much, and moved it to the side of my bowl. No hituao. No words. I did not look down at the floor. Then I ate, from beneath the table, not the swallowing sound. Something smaller than that. A breath. Just 1. Not hungry anymore, but still there. I was at the gate when I heard Tai behind me. He had come out of his house and was standing near the bicycle, still under its cloth against the far wall. His mother stood in the doorway. She said his name. He turned. "Don't ask Auntie Mai about that child," she said. Her voice was the voice she used when she had made a decision long before the conversation began. Tai looked at her. "Why?" She looked at the road, at the rice bank path, at the place where the hamlet ended and the fields began. "Your father was the last person seen carrying him away, the night the water came." Tai was quiet for a moment. "My father is dead," he said. "No." She did not look at him when she said it. "Your father is missing." From the far wall, from beneath the cloth that covered the bicycle, the chain rattled once. Latch, rattle, catch. Tai turned. The bicycle was still. The cloth hung undisturbed over the handlebars, over the frame, over the wheels. Over the chain, nothing moved. Tai's bicycle chain in the rain. Where the rice fields remember, episode 3. Tai kept his bicycle against the far wall. He had moved it there 3 mornings ago, after his mother covered it with an old cloth and pushed it toward the corner without speaking. She did it the way you do something you have been waiting to do for a long time. No hesitation, no explanation, just the act itself. And then her hands folded in front of her, and her eyes looking somewhere past the wall. Tai did not argue. He did not ask why. I was there that morning. I had come to help him patch the inner tube, a simple job, the kind of work that fills an hour without asking anything of you. His mother had tea on the table. Incense was burning at the small altar near the kitchen door. Then the chain moved. Tai's hands were on his knees. The tire iron was on the ground. The chain moved the way chains move when a wheel is spinning. Latch, rattle, catch. Tai looked at it the way you look at something you thought you owned and are no longer certain of. Then it stopped. He picked up the tire iron and went back to the tube and did not say anything for a long time. I waited. "It started," he said finally, "the 3rd night after Grandpa Nam died." He kept his eyes on the tire. "A man named Phuoc," he said. "My mother told me last night. That's whose debt this is." The name settled in the room like something that had come in through the floor. "Tell me," I said. He shook his head, not refusing, only saying, "Not yet, not here." Outside, the rain was beginning. That evening, I stood at the gate while Tai's mother spoke. She had the practiced voice she used for things she had already decided to carry without letting them show. The same voice she had used when she told me her husband was missing, not dead. She stood near the fence with both hands pressing flat against the top rail, and she told me about the flood season from 30 years ago, the one where the lamps went out across all of Bolua Hamlet at once. Chin, Ty's father, had not gone alone that night. He had taken a passenger, not the child. The child had already been passed on by then. This was a man from the far end of the hamlet, a man without a bicycle of his own, whose name was Fuak. Fuak, who had a wife and a daughter in a house where the canal ran slow and deep. Fuak, whose daughter still lived near the water. She had never moved away. She said that last part quietly, looking past me toward the canal. One sentence, no emphasis. The kind of sentence that plants a thorn before you feel it. Chin had agreed to carry Fuak home. One bicycle, one flooded path, water hip-high on the Boruong, and still rising. They made it most of the way. Then Chin heard the sound from the water beneath the path. She paused, her hands pressed harder into the rail, tapping. From below the surface, patient, steady, the way a person taps on a locked door when they have run out of other options. The Ma-Da did not call your name. They did not bargain. They were simply present, below the underside of everything, tapping, waiting for someone to look down. Chin panicked. He told Fuak to get off. Said the path was too narrow for two in water this deep. Said he would come back. Said something. She didn't know the exact words, only the shape of them, assembled over 30 years from half sentences and the silences between. He left Fuak standing alone on the flooded path. He pedaled home. He came through the door with mud to his waist and his hands shaking and said Fuak had turned back. Said Fuak had decided it was too dangerous. Said he would check in the morning. Before morning, Fuak's wife came to the door. She stood in the rain with a lamp held low and her daughter pressed against her side. Her husband had not come home. Ty's mother stopped there. The incense had burned to ash. A thread of pale smoke still rose from the tip. I stood at the gate for a long time after she went inside. Then I heard it from across the yard, from beneath the cloth against the far wall. Latch, rattle, catch, once, then nothing. I had learned something on the rice bank path the night the earth tasted my blood. There is a difference between a sound that wants something from you and a sound that is only making itself known. The first pulls, the second simply waits. This was the second kind. For now, the bicycle was not starting something new. It was joining the thing that had already begun the night I followed Ty through the rain and called a dead woman's name out loud. One more strand of the same debt, the same buried account that Bolua Hamlet had been running since before I was born. I understood that now. I did not feel any better for understanding it. That night, Muad'Dong came down. Standing rain, the old people called it. The kind that falls perfectly vertical with no wind and no end, as if the sky has decided to become a field and the rain is simply what grows there. I lay on the wooden plank in the room that had been Grandpa Nam's and thought about Fuak. Fook, who had a daughter. Fuak, who had stood on the flooded path and watched a lamp move away from him into the dark. Fuak, whose name I now knew. Knowing a name in Bolua Hamlet was never a small thing. At some point the rain changed. It did not stop. It did not get louder. But underneath it, threaded through it the way red thread is threaded through cloth so you cannot find the end, I heard the chain. Latch, rattle, catch, from outside. I opened the back door. The yard was dark. The rain came down in even columns. The canal beyond the fence was black and swollen. And in the mud of the yard, in the lamplight from the window, I saw the tracks. Two wide ones, one narrow one. Moving, not left behind. Moving now, the mud pressing open in real time, as if a wheel were turning through it at the pace of a slow walk, mark by mark, heading toward the fence. Toward the canal. I watched until the tracks reached the fence post and stopped. The chain stopped with them. I stood in the doorway barefoot, rain blowing cold against my ankles. Then from the direction of the fence, a voice said my name. Not a call, not a summons. The voice of someone reading a name from a list, checking that they have it right. It was Chin's voice. I had never met Chin. I had no memory of how he sounded. I had no right to recognize him. And yet, the way the path had learned my blood on the night of the bamboo cut, the land had been teaching me to know things I had no natural way of knowing. Every name I'd called, every account I'd opened, had made me more readable to what was already here. Grandpa Nam had tried to warn me, not with words, with counting. 1, 2, 3, his face going slack before the fourth. He had been counting the debts I would have to carry after he was gone. I did not answer the voice at the fence. I shut the door and lay down with my hands flat at my sides and waited for morning. Moving in the dark was its own kind of answer. I had learned that. In the morning, Ty was already in the yard. He was crouched over the bicycle, cloth pulled back, looking at the rear tire without touching it. He looked up when I came out, then at the mud. The 3 tracks were still there, pressed deep, undisturbed by a full night of standing rain, as if they had been made beneath the rain rather than before it, as if nothing the sky dropped could fill them in. Ty put 2 fingers in the mud beside the narrow track. He did not pull them back. He stayed crouched with his fingers in the earth and his face very still. I sat down on the step. Neither of us spoke for a while. My father knew the stories, he said finally, not asking, working through it. He knew what the tapping meant. He panicked anyway. I said nothing. Knowing something, he said, and still doing the wrong thing. What does that make him? The question sat in the air between us without anyone answering it. He stood. Fuok's daughter, he said. She still lives near the canal. She never moved away. He picked up the cloth and laid it back over the bicycle, carefully from the handlebars down. I thought then about what the bicycle was doing. It was not chasing anyone. It was carrying something. That was all it knew how to do. Ngan was a woman in her mid-40s, with her mother's wide forehead and a face that had been holding something for a long time. Expression moved across it slowly, the way silt moves in still water. She received us near the canal-facing window and did not ask why we had come. She already knew. Your father came to my mother's house once, she said to Ty. After everything. He stood at the gate for a long time. He said he heard the tapping and he couldn't move. Ty's hands were still in his lap. My mother didn't open the gate. She went back inside and we sat together until we heard him walk away. She paused. I was 8. I thought he was a ghost. Ty made a sound that was not a word. He wasn't, Ngan said. He was just a man who had left someone behind and couldn't find the way back. Then, did he ever tell you what happened out there? What he saw? Ty shook his head. He wrote it down, she said. She brought it from the back room, a piece of paper, brown and thin at the folds, folded into quarters. She set it on the table without touching it again. Ty read it once, set it back at exactly the angle it had been. I did not read it, but before he folded it again, I saw the last line, just one sentence in handwriting that pressed deep into the paper as if the pen had been shaking. I heard him tapping from below me, but when I looked back, Fuok was still standing on the path. The tapping had not come from the water, or it had come from both places at once. Ty folded the paper. No one in the room asked which was worse. Ty stood. Is there anything my family owes yours, he said. Not a question. Ngan looked at him for a moment. Tell his daughter, she said, careful with the tense. Tell her that he tried. He got afraid, Ty said. No, but he tried. She said nothing more. We walked home along the canal path in the last of the afternoon light. A frog called somewhere ahead and went quiet. The water beside us was dark and slow. At the gate, I stopped. From inside the yard, from beneath the cloth, the chain turned. Latch. Rattle. Catch. Once. Silence. Ty stood with his hand on the latch. Do you think it's done? He asked. I thought about the red thread still tied around my ankle, about the upside-down bowl leaking black water onto the morning step, about Grandpa Nam counting 1, 2, 3, his face going slack before the 4th. No, I said. He nodded as if he had prepared the answer before asking the question. He went inside. I stood at the gate. The cloth over the bicycle did not move. Then I looked at the mud beside my feet. 3 tracks. Fresh. Not heading toward the canal this time. Heading toward the rice bank path. Toward the burial mound, where a rusted bicycle wheel had turned once in the mud on the night the land first tasted my blood. The tracks were still moving, slowly, pressing into the wet ground mark by mark, at the pace of someone very old or very tired, or carrying something they have never been able to put down. Moving without a bicycle, moving without a rider, still trying to arrive somewhere. The canal behind Mr. Bin's fields, where the rice fields remember. Episode 4. Mr. Bin had been staying with a cousin in town for 2 weeks by the time I went to his house. His wife said he came back during the day to check the fields. He left before dark. She said it without looking at me, the way you describe something you have agreed not to call what it is. The canal had been rising on its own every night for 3 weeks. People in the hamlet noticed. Nobody said anything directly. That was how things moved in Bolua hamlet, sideways, slowly, until someone else named it first. It was Ty who told me. We were at the ferry landing watching the morning boat, and he said it flat and quiet, the way he said things now. People say if you look into Mr. Bin's canal at the wrong hour, you see something. He did not say what. I had been in Bolua hamlet long enough to know it didn't matter what you called it. What mattered was what was owed, and by whom, and how long ago. I went on a Tuesday afternoon, when the light was white and the canal ran ordinary and still. Mr. Bin's house sat at the far end of the hamlet where the paddies widened and the land was flat and rich. Concrete fence, tile roof, persimmon trees in the yard. The only house in Bolua hamlet with a concrete fence. His wife met me at the gate with tea and clean hands, and the eyes of someone who had gotten very good at not looking directly at certain things. We sat on the covered porch. Through the fence slats I could see the canal, low and calm in the afternoon. Nothing wrong with it. I asked about the water. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said it started on a death anniversary. Her mother-in-law's. She was the one who handled the land arrangement, she said. Before I came into this family, I only know what I was told. I noticed the fence near the base of the wall. On the inside, a dark horizontal stain, a hand's height from the ground. Even and slow, like something that had been rising for a long time before anyone paid attention. The outside of the fence was dry. I did not point it out, neither did she. What she told me, in a voice that had rehearsed itself into something flat and manageable, was this. 25 years ago, there was a widow named Swang at the far end of the canal. Her husband had drowned in the smaller flood, before the big one. She was left with 2 parcels of land and a daughter too small to work them, and a debt to Mr. Bin's family that had been growing since the funeral. His mother offered to hold 1 parcel until the debt was repaid. Swang signed in front of witnesses. She could read some words, but not all of them, and the paper treated both parcels as security. She did not understand this until the following planting season, when she walked out to tend her field and found it fenced with new posts. She went to see Mr. Bin's mother. She was turned away at the gate. She came back the next day and the day after. On the 3rd day, the man at the gate told her the papers had witnesses and fingerprints, and there was nothing to discuss. People in the hamlet knew enough not to ask too loudly. Water rights, land, credit, they all passed through the same few hands. Nobody wanted their own affairs looked at too closely. Swang stood at that gate for a long time. Then she walked home along the canal path. That was the last time anyone saw her walk it in daylight. She was found the next morning beside the canal, not in the water, sitting against the old bank post with her legs in the mud and her eyes open, looking at the far field, the one that had been hers. Her daughter was sent to relatives. Mr. Bin's mother paid for the funeral. That was considered enough. Mr. Bin's wife finished her tea. She did not look at the canal. I went to the canal that evening. Not his stretch, the section further along, where the old bank post still stood that Swang had been found against. Gray now, half swallowed by grass. I crouched beside it. The water was low and clear. I could see the silt at the bottom, pale and still. A piece of duckweed turned in a small circle. A broken rice stem floated past. Near the bank, a dead snail turned once, pale belly upward, then drifted down and disappeared into the mud. Then the water rose. Not a wave, not a surge, just a slow climbing, the way water rises when you tilt a bowl. Deliberate, like something below was lifting it from underneath. I did not look away. I should have. The face was in the surface, not below it. The way a face appears in a still window at night, present in the glass itself, not behind it. Wide, wide as the canal. A woman's face, the features stretched long by the current's memory, eyes open and fixed not up at the sky but outward, at the far bank, at the field. Still looking at what was taken, the water began to tap against the bank. Lap, pause, lap, patient, returning again and again to the same place. I stayed. I did not call her name. I didn't know it yet. And in Bolua hamlet, a half name is worse than silence. It opens a door you cannot close again. The face watched me, not threatening, only making sure I had seen it. I walked home along the far path. The red thread around my ankle felt warm where it touched skin. Not uncomfortable, just present. That night I woke before dawn to the shutters standing open. I had latched them from the inside. The smell of canal mud was in the room. Deep mud, green rot, the smell of water that has been sitting in one place for a long time. On the sill, a smear of mud, fresh. The shape of a palm pressed flat, 4 fingers close together, thumb beside them. The shape a hand makes when it is bracing, when it is trying not to be swept away. I went to Auntie Lan in the morning. She heard the name Swang, and her hands stopped in the washing basin. She stood there a moment before she lifted the rice out and set it to drain. "Where did you hear that?" she said, not a question. I told her the canal showed me. She dried her hands 4 times, folded the cloth and looked at the wall. "Swang's daughter," she said. "She's not in the next hamlet anymore. She came back 2 years ago, lives near the canal." I understood then. "Ngan," I said. Auntie Lan sat down. "Fuak was her father," I said. She looked at me, then away. "Swang lost the land," she said. "Then she lost Fuak. Then she lost the girl to the relatives." She was quiet. People remember one tragedy at a time. It is easier that way. The canal sound came through the window. Lap. Pause. Lap. That evening I went back. I crouched at the bank post again. The water rose. The face returned. I said, "Swang." The insects stopped. Just for one breath, everything went silent. Then the canal rose another finger higher, slow and sure, and then it went still. The face did not disappear, but it changed. The expression shifted in a way I didn't have a word for. Not peace, something before peace. The expression of a person who has been seen, not saved. The tapping stopped. The water held for 3 breaths. Then it began to drop. Slow, no drama, just withdrawal. The way someone steps back from a window when they have seen what they needed to see. I stayed until the canal was low again and the face was gone and only silt remained at the bottom, pale and still. The mud on my knuckles was cold. I hadn't noticed I'd put my hands in the water, but the silt was deep under my nails, gray and fine, smelling of the canal bottom. For 3 days after, I washed my hands and it stayed. Even clean water tasted faintly of it, mineral and old, the taste of water that has been in the earth a long time. The gray faded by the 3rd morning, but every time I touched the door latch or the water jar or the edge of the sleeping plank, I left a faint mark. Like I had brought a little of the canal home with me, a small amount of it sitting in the creases of my hands. On the last morning, there was a single rice stalk laid across the threshold. Cut, not planted. The grain still full and pale, the stem dry, the way rice looks when it's been kept somewhere dark. I knew where it was from without being able to explain how I knew. I left it there. Tai came by that afternoon. He looked at the stalk. He looked at me. He didn't ask. We sat on the step for a while. "Ngan," I said. He nodded. He already knew. "Her mother's land is still Mr. Bin's," he said. "Yes. Does it change anything? You saying her name?" I thought about Auntie Lin, about what naming had done, not freed her, only given back what was taken, and what it had cost me. My voice for a day and a half. The changed way I heard things after. "It changes what I carry," I said. Tai looked at the rice stalk. "What about her?" I didn't have an answer. The canal behind Mr. Bin's fields was quiet that night for the first time in weeks. Not healed, quiet. Those are not the same thing. When the wind moved through the yard before dawn, it lifted the dry grain ends of the rice stalk and turned them toward the far field. The one behind the concrete fence, still pointing, still knowing where it came from. The sickle after the thunder. Where the rice fields remember, episode 5. The sickle showed up on Uncle Tam's altar the morning after a thunderstorm that brought no rain. Dry thunder was already a bad sign in Bolua hamlet. The old people said it was the sky practicing. They didn't say what for. Uncle Tam found it at dawn when he went to light incense. An old blade, thinner than his own work, broken at the neck where it had snapped from the handle. The rust on it was dark brown, not the orange of old iron, but something closer to dried blood. It lay flat on the altar cloth like it had been placed deliberately. He had never seen it before. He threw it in the canal. It was back the next morning. He threw it again, further out, into the deep section where the water runs cloudy even in dry season. 3rd morning altar, same position, same angle. He stopped throwing it after that. I heard about it from the charcoal woman who bought from him. She said Uncle Tam's forge had been cold for a week. His wife had moved her sleeping mat to the front room, and nobody had gone inside to check. I went that afternoon. He was out back sharpening a hoe by hand, doing it slowly, the way you do something simple when you need to keep your hands busy. He was a big man, heavy-set, with forearms built from 40 years at the forge, and hands so callous they had their own texture. He looked up when I came through the gate. "You've been going around asking about old things," he said. I said yes. He set the hoe down. "I have one," he said. We sat on the bench by the forge, cold charcoal, damp clay, the smell of iron and rain. The forge had been out long enough that I couldn't imagine it burning. He told me about Duke and Kong. Kong used to bring his tools in every harvest season. He paid late sometimes, but he always paid. He had a quiet way of waiting by the forge, not hovering, just standing a little away from the fire, because the smoke made his eyes water, leaning against the fence post with his arms folded until the work was done. His sickle had a notch near the heel of the blade where he'd once hit a buried stone. Uncle Tam knew that notch, knew the way Kong wrapped the handle with black cloth when the grip were smooth. 12 years ago, 3 nights before the harvest festival, Duke came to the side door at an hour when people should have been sleeping. He brought his own sickle, old, handle-worn smooth. He asked Uncle Tam to sharpen it. Uncle Tam sharpened many sickles before harvest. It wasn't unusual work, but the hour was wrong, and the door was wrong, and the way Duke's eyes didn't settle on anything was wrong. "I knew," Uncle Tam said. "Before I touched the blade, I knew something wasn't right, but I told myself it was just a sickle, that it wasn't my business why." He sharpened it. He handed it back. Duke thanked him and left. 2 mornings later, Kong was found in his field with a wound that the commune health worker called an accident. A sickle accident, the kind that happens in harvest season when someone swings wide. Kong had been alone. No witnesses. The wound was on the wrong side for an accident. Uncle Tam knew this. He had enough experience with blades to read the angle and understand exactly whose hand had done it and how. He said nothing. Duke was never arrested. The case closed. Kong's family left Bolua Hamlet before the next planting season. The land, a small parcel near the burial mound, went to Duke through papers done properly, with signatures and everything. Uncle Tam had kept working, kept sharpening tools, kept going to market, kept eating, kept sleeping. "I didn't kill Kong," he said. He wasn't asking me to agree. He was being precise. But I sharpened the tool. I knew something was wrong before I did it, and I kept quiet after. He looked at the cold forge. I just decided not to know. Inside, the sickle lay on the altar exactly where it had been each morning. I looked at it without touching it. On the altar cloth, just below where the blade rested, there was a rust-shaped crescent stain pressed into the fabric. Old, set deep, the color you cannot wash out because it has already become part of the cloth. The cup of water on the altar smelled faintly metallic. I leaned close. Copper and iron together, the smell of old tools and old water. Uncle Tam had sharpened it. His hands had touched it. He was the last person who held that blade before it was used. That was why it had come back to him, not to threaten, only to be recognized. "What do I do with it?" he said. "Say what you know," I said, out loud, at the altar. Not to me, to whatever came back with the blade. He looked at me. "Not a confession," I said. "Just what's true. You sharpened it. You knew something was wrong. You kept quiet after." He was quiet for a while. "Will that be enough?" "No," I said, "but it's yours to give." I stepped outside. I waited by the fence near the cold forge. 10 minutes, maybe 15. The dry thunder rolled once more, distant and low. Then it stopped. Through the half-open door, I heard Uncle Tam say a name. Just once. Barely audible, the way you say something when you have been holding it a long time and are finally letting it out. "Kong." Then silence. When Uncle Tam came to the door, his face looked the same as before. Large, still, weathered. But his hands, which had been pressed flat on his thighs all afternoon, now hung loose at his sides. I left him there. Walking home, I could hear my own footsteps too clearly. Real rain came down finally, the kind that commits, and the red thread around my ankle was warm, the way it always was when something had shifted. That night, I woke at 3 to a single metallic note. High, clean, brief. The sound a blade makes when it's struck against something solid. Once, then quiet. Then from outside, in the direction of the burial mound, a rooster crowed. 2 hours before dawn, wrong. I lay still and listened for a second crow from somewhere else in the hamlet. The way real roosters spread, one answering another until the yard birds are all awake. Nothing answered. One rooster, alone, crowing into silence. Grandpa Nam had mentioned this once. Not as a warning, just as something he knew. One false rooster with no answer. Something in the hamlet is preparing. Not a ghost. Something larger. In the morning, Uncle Tam's forge was lit for the first time in a week. I could see the smoke from Grandpa Nam's porch, black and straight in the still air. On my threshold, a small square of cloth, cotton, gray-white, folded into quarters. Plain enough that you'd step over it without thinking. I picked it up, empty inside, but it smelled of iron. And when I held it to the light, one side of the weave was darker than the other. the way cloth gets when it has been wrapped around something for years and has taken the shape of it. A curved crescent, the shape of a sickle blade. I set it on Grandpa Nam's altar and lit the incense. Across the hamlet, the forge had started again. Metal and fire, the ordinary rhythm of it. And from the direction of the burial mound, underneath that sound, there was something else. A low disturbance, like ground shifting after a long time of holding still. Not a sound I could name yet. Not movement exactly. Just the sense that something buried had been touched and was beginning to stir. The unmarked burial mound, where the rice fields remember, Episode 6. Han came to Grandpa Nam's house on a Thursday morning and stood at the gate without knocking. I saw him from the porch. A thin man in his 60s, weathered face, dressed plainly. The kind of person you'd pass on a market path without noticing. His father had tended the burial mound before him. His grandfather before that. It wasn't a formal role, just something the family did. They lived nearby. They paid attention. He stood at the gate for a while. I went to him. My father told me before he died, he said, that someone would come eventually who could hear the names. He said when that person came, I should bring them to the mound. No ceremony in it. A practical man delivering a message that had been waiting 30 years. I said I'd come. On the walk over, Han told me a little about the work. He came to the mound 2 or 3 times a week to clear grass, reset incense cups that the rain knocked over, check if any markers had tilted. No payment, no formal acknowledgement from the hamlet. He had taken over when his father's hands got too stiff. You don't find it difficult, I said, working near the dead. He looked sideways at me. No more than farming. The dead stay where they are. It's the living that make it complicated. We went that evening, in the low late light when everything cast long shadows, and the air had cooled enough to think clearly. The burial mound sat at the edge of the cultivated land, where the paddies ended and the ground swelled slightly. Not a real hill, just the slow rising that happens when a place has been used for too long. Proper graves stood at the edges. Fresh chrysanthemums on some, old plastic wrap on others, ceramic photographs, small incense cups. Families had been here recently. But in the center, in a rough triangle of ground that nobody had planted flowers near, were the 3 graves I had seen in the lightning on the first night I walked the rice bank path. No markers, no photographs, no names. The grass around them was dry and close-cropped from wind rather than tending. Old incense sticks lay broken and rain-gray near the mounds. On one of the marked graves nearby, a line of ants moved back and forth along the concrete edge. Around the 3 unmarked mounds, the ants moved in a wide detour, keeping their distance without any visible reason. 3 objects, 1 for each grave. The rusted bicycle wheel, its spokes intact but thick with orange-brown rust, the rim slightly bent. The broken sickle blade, though I had watched it on Uncle Tam's altar 3 days before, and yet here it was, laid at the same angle it always occupied. And the upside-down rice bowl, pale porcelain, thin-rimmed, half-hidden in the dry grass. I had seen all 3 before. The wheel and the lightning, the first night the hamlet tasted my blood. The sickle at Uncle Tam's forge. The bowl at Auntie Mai's, where a child named Dewey had made a swallowing sound from under the table and asked which house was his. Han stood beside me. My father put them here after the flood year, he said. He found them near the canal, the wheel in the water, the sickle in the field mud. He didn't know exactly whose they were, but he knew there were people buried without markers. So he placed what he found on the graves he thought were right. Thought, I said. He wasn't certain. Han looked at the 3 mounds. He said the graves were already here. He only gave them something to be known by. I crouched beside the bicycle wheel. The rust flaked at the edges, but the wheel held together, every spoke present. I put my hand on the rim, not the spokes, just the outer edge. Cold at first, then not. A slow warmth came into it. Not heat, just the temperature of something that still had some connection to the living. I moved to the sickle without touching it. The break was rough, not the clean snap of metal giving way on its own, but a jagged fracture, the kind left when a blade twists against something hard, something that pushed back. Han watched me. "What do you hear?" he asked. I hadn't told him about the sounds, but he'd lived beside this mound his whole life. His father before him, he didn't need me to explain. "Not yet," I said. I stood back and looked at all 3. The wheel, the sickle, the bowl. I had spent weeks with each of them. The wheel and a man left alone in rising water. The sickle and a blade sharpened in the wrong hour. The bowl and a child who never got an answer to his question. Maybe each object marked one specific person, but maybe that wasn't all. The same things had happened more than once in Bolua Hamlet. Someone left behind, a tool used for harm, someone fed too late or not at all. Maybe the objects marked a kind of thing, not just a person. Han's father hadn't needed to know exact names to recognize the shape of what had happened. I stood. I said, "Auntie Lynn." The air above the leftmost mound shifted, not visibly, the way a room changes when someone has just left it. The red thread around my ankle tightened once, released. I said, "Fuak." The bicycle wheel turned. 1/2 revolution. Slow. The way it had turned in the lightning on the first night, when I had seen the mound from a distance and not yet understood what I was looking at. Han made no sound, but his breathing slowed. I looked at the third mound, the bowl. "I don't know your name," I said, "but I hear you." The bowl didn't move, but the grass around it shifted, just slightly. A small, slow movement, like something beneath the earth adjusting its weight. Then from underneath the bowl, breathing. Not the swallowing sound from Auntie Mai's house, just breath, small and steady and very slow. It no longer sounded like waiting. Han sat down in the grass. "My father said that grave was here before he was born," he said, "before his father. He said the mound grew up around it, like the hamlet built itself on top of something it had already decided to forget." I looked at the bowl. "I can't say your name," I said. "I don't have it, but I hear you." The breathing kept on. We sat with the mound until the stars came out, and the hamlet behind us was just scattered yellow lamps, and the canal was a dark line in the distance. On the walk back, Hans said, "My father was afraid his whole life that someone would ask him for the names, and he wouldn't have them. He gave them what he could," I said. "The objects, the attention." Han nodded. "Is that enough?" "Same question Uncle Tam had asked, same question Tai asked." "No," I said, "but it's what was there." Back at the house, I lit incense at Grandpa Nam's altar, set a cup of water on the left side for whoever the third grave belonged to. I ate a little rice, cold from the pot standing at the stove. The incense burned down while I stood there. I lit another stick from the first, sat for a while with the cloth that smelled of iron, the red thread, the faint gray still under my nails from the canal. Grandpa Nam had tried to count before he died. 1, 2, 3, his face going slack before 4. I'd been thinking about that fourth thing all along. It wasn't anything from these recent weeks. It wasn't any name I'd been given. It was older. Connected to this house, to the land this house stood on. Connected to the coconut tree in the yard that cast its shadow across the porch every afternoon of Grandpa Nam's life. I wasn't ready to go there yet. But readiness, I'd learned, wasn't how Bolua Hamlet worked. It didn't wait for you to be ready. It waited for you to be present. And I was present, whether I wanted to be or not. The night the roosters crowed wrong, where the rice fields remember, episode 7. It started with one rooster, not mine. A rooster from somewhere near the coconut row, crowing at 2 in the morning when the sky was still fully dark and the dogs hadn't stirred. One crow, then nothing. I'd been waking at odd hours for weeks. The hearing the land had opened in me had also changed my sleep, made it shallower, left me sitting up in the dark at random intervals. Not frightened, just present. The way an animal goes still when the air shifts. I heard the crow and counted. 1. Silence. Lay back down. The second came from the other end of the hamlet near the canal, 40 minutes later. Too far for an answer. Too late. The dogs still hadn't moved between them. I didn't sleep again after that one. By morning, I'd counted 7, scattered across Bolua Hamlet. Each one alone. Each one crowing before the sky had decided to get light. Tai was at the ferry landing before the first boat. He had dark circles and a thermos of tea. He handed me a cup without asking if I'd heard. "My mother didn't sleep," he said. I asked if she'd heard something at the gate. My father's voice, calling her name from outside. He said it carefully, precise. "She didn't go to the door." I let out a breath. "She sat up with a lamp all night. She knew what it was." He looked at the river. "She's always known." He told me Anne's mother had come to their house at dawn. The boy had been sitting in the yard since midnight. Wouldn't come inside, wouldn't speak. Little Anne, the duck herder's boy, 9 or 10 years old, small and quiet. I went. He was still on the step when I arrived. Knees up, arms around them, a short bamboo stick across his lap, the kind used for herding ducks. Bare feet dirty from the yard, eyes fixed on the gate, His mother stood in the doorway behind him. I sat down beside him. He didn't look at me. "Who did you hear?" I said. His mother made a small sound. Not a protest, just absorbing something she'd already been expecting. "My grandmother," Ann said, flat, careful. "Children say frightening things this way. The flatness is the only container they have. She died before I was born, but my mother has recordings. Old phone recordings." He paused. "It sounded exactly like them." "Did you answer?" He shook his head. "I wanted to," he said. "It was exactly her voice." I said, "You did well." He didn't look like he felt it. His mother came down and sat on his other side, her arm around him. He leaned in, still watching the gate. She looked at me over his head. Not fear of the thing itself, fear of what she knew and hadn't said. The anxiety of someone whose silence had been patient for years and was running out of time. She was a woman maybe 10 years older than me, plain-featured with ink-stained fingers from keeping accounts at the market. She touched her throat once, briefly with her free hand, a small habit, like checking something was still there. I waited and fell asleep between us inside 10 minutes. The hard, sudden sleep of a child who has been keeping watch too long. After a while, with his head against her arm, she said quietly, "I know whose grave the third one is." I stayed still. "My grandmother told me, before she died." Her voice was low. "She said the hamlet had decided to forget and that it was kinder." I thought of Grandpa Nam. Almost the same words, almost the same reason. The choice to forget hadn't been made once. It had been made many times, in many houses, across many years. Each person deciding the silence was protection, each one adding another layer to what was already buried. "You don't have to tell me tonight," I said. "Anne is sleeping. You've been up since midnight. Tonight is enough." She was quiet for a long time. "Tomorrow," she said. I nodded. I walked home through the full morning, past the coconut row, along the rice bank path. Ordinary in daylight, packed mud, canal beside it, rice on both sides. I had been walking this path since I was 12. I knew which stretches turned muddy after rain, which sections of bank had exposed roots to step over, where the path narrowed between two old water palms. I knew it the way you know a road when you stop thinking about it. I made it 50 meters before something changed. Not the way it had changed on the first night. No will-o-wisps, no face in the water. Just a slight wrongness. A turn where the path should run straight. The coconut row appearing on the left when it should be on the right. The smell of canal mud arriving before the canal was close enough to smell. I had said yes to something without meaning to. Some agreement in the conversation with Anne's mother had registered as an answer, and the path had noticed. I stopped. "I know where I am," I said out loud. "I have walked this path since I was a child." The path gave nothing back. "I am not lost," I said. I turned around. I walked home the long way. Through the market, past Uncle Tam's forge with its morning smoke, past the well where women were drawing water and talking about the roosters. Everything ordinary, everything named and known. The path didn't follow me, but it had taken note. On my threshold, a cup of water, full, still, left by no one I'd seen. I picked it up and drank it. It felt like the wrong thing to refuse. Some offerings in Bolua Hamlet carry their own statement. Refusing them is also an answer. The water tasted of the canal. Not dirty, just deep, mineral, old. The taste of water that has been in one place so long it has become part of the ground. That afternoon, in the heat when the hamlet napped, I sat on Grandpa Nam's porch and listened. A dog barked once near the market and went quiet. A child called out from 3 houses down, then stopped. The ordinary sounds of midday, and beneath them, if you knew to listen for it, I did now, always, the other layer. The bicycle chain from Ty's direction, faint. The lapping of the canal, slow and patient. The single metallic note from near the forge, still occasionally ringing. The breathing from the burial mound, too far for ordinary ears. For the first time, all of them at once. Not louder, just no longer separate. Like sounds in a room that have slowly found the same rhythm without meaning to. I thought about Grandpa Nam. 1, 2, 3. The fourth was still ahead of me. I didn't go to the coconut tree that evening. I sat on the porch until dark, until the first lamps came on across the paddies, until the canal was just a black line and the burial mound was invisible in the dark. Soon, that night, all the roosters in Bolua Hamlet crowed at once. Not 2 in the morning. Midnight exactly. Every yard, every rooster. And this time, something answered from the direction of the coconut tree near Grandpa Nam's house. Not a rooster. Low, close, like someone standing on the other side of a thin door, breathing, deciding whether to knock. The Coconut Tree Without a Shadow. Where the Rice Fields Remember, Episode 8. I am telling you this because you are old enough. Because you have started asking about Bolua Hamlet the way I used to, pointing at things from the back of the motorcycle, wanting to know the names of the old paths, asking why some stretches of canal smell different from others. Because the red thread you found in my drawer is not a decoration. And because I don't have as much time to tell you things as I once thought I did. So, the coconut tree stood 30 meters from your great-grandfather's house, close enough that its shadow fell across the front porch every late afternoon of his life. He planted it himself the year he married. He said once that he measured his days by it. The morning after the roosters, I came back to that yard and the tree had no shadow. Not because the sun was overhead. It was mid-morning, the sun well to the east. Everything else had shadows. The fence posts, the water jar, the neighbor's roof. The coconut tree stood in full light with nothing trailing behind it, as if the ground beneath it had decided it didn't belong to the same world as everything else. I looked at it for a long time. Then I went inside and lit incense at Grandpa Nam's altar and waited. Anne's mother came at noon. She sat at the table with her hands flat on the wood and told me the name. It had been in her family since her grandmother's grandmother, passed down not as a story, not as a warning, just a name. You remember it, you don't say it. The name was Van. She had been the first person to work the land where Grandpa Nam's house now stood, before his grandfather built there, before anyone now living was born. Her husband had died in a war that people still referred to by its number rather than its name. She was left alone with the land and worked it by herself for years, growing rice, some vegetables, keeping to herself. She grew old. Her neighbors, the family that would become, slowly and through marriage and time, Grandpa Nam's family, began helping her. At first it was genuine, a hand with the planting, help moving water when the pump failed, the kind of help neighbors give. Then the help became something else, decisions made on her behalf. Her name left off papers, her presence less necessary than it had once been. No single dramatic moment, just the slow replacement of one person with another, until Van had been so thoroughly covered over that no one living remembered she had been there. When she died, she was buried on the land she had worked, under the spot where Grandpa Nam would later plant his coconut tree, on a grave that was already 2 generations old by the time he broke the earth. He didn't know. His father hadn't told him. His grandfather had covered it the way people cover things they can't explain and can't keep looking at. Van had been waiting ever since. Not for justice, that was gone too long ago. Not for the land back. Too many hands had held it since. Just for someone to say her name, on her land, once. That was all. I sat with Anne's mother until she was done. Then I walked to the coconut tree. I put my hand on the bark, rough and warm from the morning sun. Ordinary living wood. I said, Van. The shadow came back. Not gradually, not in pieces. It was just there, cast at the right angle, falling across the yard and the fence and the edge of the porch exactly as it should. I stood in it. The shade was cool, the temperature of ordinary shade. But the air had changed. The way a room settles after something that was suspended in it finally comes to rest. Not resolved, not repaired, just no longer suspended. I went back inside. I sat at the altar, and then I said all of them. I hadn't planned to. It just felt like the right time. Auntie Lin, Phuc Dui, Swang Kong Van, then quieter. And the ones I don't know. The ones nobody told me. The ones who were here before the records. The room was still. The incense burned. No dramatic response. No sound from the canal. No chain. No blade note. No breathing from the mound. Just smoke rising slow and straight in the still air of Grandpa Nam's front room. And his photograph on the altar. He was younger in it than I remembered. The face of a man I never knew. The man he was before the weight of 60 years had settled into him. He looked out at me with an expression I had been trying to read since the first day I stood in this room. Not approval, not guilt, something between them. The expression of a man who believed most of his life that protecting the living was worth the silencing of the dead, who died still not entirely certain he was wrong, and who left the whole question to me because I was the only person he trusted to sit with the uncertain parts without forcing them into a shape they didn't fit. I understood the counting then. He had not been counting what others owed. He had been counting the things he hadn't told me. 1. Auntie Lin. He had been on the rice bank path the night she fell into the canal. He heard her. He turned away. He was 17 and frightened, and the decision took less time than a breath. He carried it for 60 years after. 2. Chin. After the night Chin left Phuoc on the flooded path, Chin had come to Grandpa Nam, confessed in the dark, in this house, at this table, and Grandpa Nam had told him to be quiet. For the family, for the hamlet, for everyone's sake, Chin had listened. He always listened to Grandpa Nam. 3. Van. He had felt the presence under the coconut tree since childhood. He never knew her name. His grandfather had been careful about that, but he knew something was there. He let it stay buried because digging it up would mean digging up everything else. His grandfather, his family, the ground the house stood on. He had reached 3. His face went slack before the 4th. 4 was him. Not what he watched, not what he covered for, what he did. At 17, on a flooded path, when a woman's voice called from the water, and he made a choice in a single breath that he spent the rest of his life not making again. He had believed that carrying it was enough, that not forgetting was its own kind of payment. It wasn't enough, but I understood why he thought it might be. The accounting had to include the accountant. I said his name, Nam, not to summon anything, not in anger, just to complete the record, so that the person who had spent his life keeping count would be counted too. The incense burned down. I lit another. That evening, Tai came with his mother. She had brought her own chopsticks. She laid them out herself, served rice into Grandpa Nam's old bowl, the one on the altar. Then she lowered herself beside the table and pressed her left hand flat to the floor. 1 knock, 2, 3, clear and complete. She had been trying to make that 3rd knock for 20 years. She picked up her chopsticks and began to eat. The 3 of us ate on the porch, Tai and his mother and me, while the canal ran dark beyond the fence, and the burial mound sat out somewhere in the night, and the coconut tree stood in the yard, with its shadow pooled normally at its base, going nowhere, belonging to itself. After dinner, Tai's mother washed the bowls. Tai and I sat on the step. "Are you staying?" he asked. I thought about the thread around my ankle that I had stopped trying to remove, the canal taste that came and went, the sounds that arrived half a second before they should. "No," I said. He nodded. "You'll come back, though." "Probably. The land knows me now." He was quiet. "Is it done?" Same question he had asked at Ngan's gate. I thought about Van's shadow returning, about Anne's mother saying a name her grandmother had carried for 50 years, about Ty's mother completing the knock she had never been able to finish. "Some of it," I said, "the parts that could be done." He looked at the coconut tree. "That's less than I hoped for. It's more than was there before." He thought about that, then nodded the way he nodded when he'd prepared an answer and decided to accept it. His mother came to the door. "Time to go." They walked home along the canal path. The lamp on his mother's bicycle threw a yellow circle on the dark road, and I watched it until it was gone. I went inside one last time and sat at the altar. I looked at Grandpa Nam's photograph. "I'm not going to be you," I said, not angry, just clear. "I'll carry what I've carried, but I won't decide for other people what they're allowed to know." The incense smoke moved slightly in a direction there was no draft from. Maybe acknowledgement. I packed my bag in the morning, the cloth that smelled of iron, the cup of water I had kept filled on the altar every day. I left it full when I went. I paused at the door. The yard was ordinary in the morning light. The coconut tree had its shadow. The canal was low and still. The rice leaned slightly in a small wind off the water. Everything looked the same as before. Everything was different in the ways that don't show. The rice bank path behind the coconut row was clear. Just mud and canal and rice in rows. I walked it without incident. No voice, no chain, no face in the water. I was almost at the road junction when I heard it. Behind me, faint, patient, lech, rattle, catch. Once, then quiet. I didn't turn around. Some sounds aren't asking you to answer. Some sounds are only saying, "I remember you were here." And sometimes that is enough. I want you to understand that part, not the fear. Fear is the easy part, the part that makes a good story. The hard part is what comes after, what you do with what you've learned, whether you carry it so carefully it turns into silence, or whether you carry it in a way that lets it be known. Your great-grandfather carried it carefully. He thought he was protecting people. He was. He was also protecting himself. I still don't know, even now, whether you can always separate those two things. What I know is this. The land of Bolua Hamlet keeps account. It will keep account of you too, if you go there. The rice bank path will be there. The canal will be there. The burial mound will be there, with those 3 graves and whatever else has been added since I left. Go carefully. Don't answer if you hear your name from somewhere you can't see. And if the path takes your blood, and it will one way or another, because that is what the path does, understand what that means. Blood is not a gift you give to the land. It is a receipt. Proof you were there. Proof that you are now part of what that land remembers. The rest is up to you. It has always been up to you.